Right now, Battle Creek Police Chief Jim Blocker joins us. Chief, good morning. Nice to have you here today.
Good morning, Tim. It's great to be here.
I guess the first thing I want to ask you, the new building, you've been in there now since, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months now. What's it feel like? It's probably still a work in progress, no doubt, but is it making an impact on efficiency?
Well, you're right. We have been in the building. We're going on about 4 months now, and it's a wonderful feeling. I think every day I go in and I think, this is just really what a marvelous gift that we've been given by the community, and yet knowing that we've worked hard to see how the planning and the thought and the hard work that went into designing a building that was really functional, help us be more efficient, and where the information flow, and that's really where you capture that efficiency, was all built into. And what we're really finding is it's working. We looked at collaborative workspaces in different industries, and that's how we designed the facility, and that's working. And so yeah, but no, it's not done by any stretch of the imagination. We've still, like any new home, you're constantly working on changing things and really, in a way, making it yours.
In some respects, police work hasn't changed in 200 years, but in a lot of respects, it has changed a ton in the last 10. And so you look at an old building that, if it's 50 years old, it wasn't designed for some of these things.
Well, no, it wasn't. It was designed without servers in mind, or the internet, or certainly without the forensic lab, the lab that we have today, and so many other things, especially technology. But you are right. The basics are still the basics. The work is still the work, and nothing but hard work will get you what you need.
Well, and certainly one thing that hasn't changed with police departments is that they kind of run on a military model. We have sergeants, and we have chiefs. We have a chain of command. You have a certain type of morale and camaraderie that you see in the military. I mean, these are all things that we've learned in hundreds, well, actually thousands of years of military history and military science. And that all very much kind of applies. The American public doesn't get to see that unless they become a member of your police academy, Citizens Police Academy. They know it's there, but they don't really know what it is.
Right, and it's hard to appreciate unless you've experienced it. But, it has to be that way. So law enforcement is a paramilitary organization, and it really starts with the fact that the community, and through the authority, the state has given law enforcement officers, peace officers, a lot of authority, and that equates to power. And because of that, there needs to be a mechanism, really beyond that of sort of a normal everyday civilian type employment, where that authority is present within the building, within the organization and their structure. And really, when you think about it, some of those things that we focus on, like details and drill and ceremony in the military and honor guards and law enforcement and both, you see a lot of crosswalking between the two organizations, because it really speaks to not just heraldry and traditions, which are really important, but it speaks to getting people to focus in and hone in on details. D&C, it really isn't all that important until you apply that sort of precision to, let's say, tactics in a response during an emergency crisis. That's when suddenly it becomes very real and practical.
There's been some discussion in our community, in fact, in all communities really, on how officers should be honored, how fallen officers should be honored. We actually have a committee that kind of deals with is taking a look at that.
We do. We have an internal committee. So years ago, the community did provide us with our law enforcement memorial, and it is between both the old facility where it was and City Hall. And it's a beautiful, beautiful structure, and it will only be enhanced now as you see that we create more green space, and the sidewalk will lead you to it, to and from our building back to City Hall, and of course that connects to downtown. Well, as we've been in the building for some months now, this committee has been looking around and looking at both product and then really location within the building itself. How do we put something internal to the building that will be permanently affixed so that we can honor the memory of those that have been tragically lost at the Battle Creek Police Department?
And getting back to this whole military science and military model, everybody who has given their lives, sometimes, we think of the most recent losses, tragic losses, but and we know those people because they were in our community, but really we have to look at that as treating everybody the same. You know, somebody who maybe gave their life in 1920 still has relatives out there, and they remember that. People who maybe gave their life in the 60s still have family members around, perhaps even some old timers that served with them. And you know, we want to be sure that we make the right move for all of them, right?
Well, any tragic loss, okay, sudden tragic loss, is going to be devastating, very personal, and it's emotionally charged and driven subject. And oftentimes, when you get into the details about making an actual decision, sometimes it's a no-win scenario. Someone else is always going to be out there that may not particularly like it. But one thing I look to and I have observed over time is what's remarkable, whether you're at the National Cemetery here at Fort Custer, which is really a beautiful place if you haven't been there, or in Arlington, for example. You know, all the crosses are the same size. And I think that is our national really ideal, is that we're saying, listen, death is the great equalizer. You know, all of these soldiers, Marines, sailors, airmen, law enforcement personnel, we remember you equally, but just as poignantly.
And as far as our committee goes, I understand there's a couple of things on the table that you're looking at that might be kind of nice addition.
There are. We are looking to try to put some sort of wall in the lobby area with permanent bronze structures that just represent those officers that have paid the ultimate price, and we tragically lost them. And we're really looking forward to having that put in place. You know, there's a lot of other things too that we're working on. We really haven't even officially dedicated the building yet or put a cornerstone in, and these are all discussions, but they're always on that priority list. But then again, operations is our daily priority as well. But it's out there, and we have time.
Absolutely. One final thing on that too. I thought this was interesting. I understand that when you were moving stuff out of the old building, you found a kind of a lonely box stored way down, and when they started looking in it, they found some very interesting things that kind of really shed a different light on this whole thing.
Well, it did. So, you know, tragically, I think every generation, and of course we don't ever want it to happen, but think of it, every generation, or at least every few generations, are going to experience a very personal and tragic loss. I think that is something that you have to at least know that is out there and anticipate. And one thing that was really touching to this memorial committee is they were putting together all of our old artifacts that they were finding, and old boxes full of things. They found a whole box full of an officer that was lost. And other than a picture, no one knew anything about this particular officer. And yet we do know that his family, spouse, is still out there. And many of us know who she is. And yet there was very little about him. And that touched the committee and said, you know, we want to create sort of a wall, or a wall of memory that is permanently affixed, so that generations from now and many years from now, as long as the building stands, will be carried on, even as people come and go.
Since we last talked, the voters of Michigan have passed a law allowing recreational marijuana, which kind of scares me to death. I'll tell you why. It's because it's so darn much stronger than it used to be. I mean, back in the 60s and 70s, where a lot of adults maybe have partaken a little bit and then put that aside for family and job and career and everything else. And now here we are, 40 years later, and this stuff is 10, 20, sometimes 90 times more potent, depending on what form it takes. Are you guys concerned?
Well, right. The THC, which is really I think the chemical that you're talking about here, is, yeah, it is known that it is stronger than it was many years ago. It's not your father's, or I suppose your grandfather's marijuana of yesterday, and it's certainly stronger. Matter of fact, it wasn't long ago that I read an article that indicated that Michigan had one of the highest THC contents in marijuana, and I got that from High Times magazine, which we're subscribed.
I'm sure you guys read off and kind of keep up on stuff.
But the voters, they did pass that, and we do have it. And so the debate of whether it was good or bad, well, that it's been passed, and so that's that. So now what we have to do is continue to work as a community, and more importantly, watch the state and see, all right, what kind of regulations are going to be created to ensure the safety and the welfare of the public, because that's really what we're focused on. It's less about that particular act or that proposal, but it's more importantly, how is this going to impact the community? We do know over the last 10 years that fatal impaired driving crashes in Michigan have gone up by 151%. In 2017, 246 were impaired driving fatalities. In other words, people have passed away. 2007, there were only 98. And so, you know, it's hard to put your finger on anything specific, but out of those 174 drivers who were tested positive for cannabinoid drug use involved, 169 of those were in motor vehicle crashes, and 131 of those 169 were classified as fatal. In other words, they were directly impacted by cannabinoid use. And so that is something that's a growing concern for all of us. Are we prepared? Do we know what impaired driving looks like? And then most importantly, how are we going to deal with it?
Yeah, that's the part that worries me as far as the potency goes, is that people behind the wheel. Now, there are concerns of people in manufacturing jobs and other, maybe I certainly want my surgeon being stoned. But really, it's people driving. And what tools does law enforcement have right now to identify that and then actually show that somebody is impaired?
So already in process, and has been for about a year now, is there is some technology, much like the preliminary breath test device, the portable device we would use for alcohol. That same similar device has been tested, saliva based, and we anticipate a report to be coming out from Michigan State Police here very soon. Impaired driving is still that. Many of the same skills that you would have utilized in observations and with a drunk driving case, you're going to still use with an impaired driving case. Remember, when we say impaired, that's a broad range of impairment. It could be marijuana, it could be alcohol, it could be prescription drugs, or a mix of sort of all of it combined.
But when we talk impaired with alcohol, we're talking about what, 0.08 on the breathalyzer?
That's right.
We don't even have that defined for other substances, do we?
You're exactly right. And we anticipate, again, these things are being developed. Certainly we're looking to Colorado, we're looking to Washington, the state is.
Mm-hmm.
We're just going to have to stand by and see how does the state want to make this work.
And Battle Creek Police Chief Jim Blocker is our guest. We talked a little while ago about burn grants, Chief Blocker. These were grants, if I recall, that were going to let the department kind of concentrate on some crime hotspots within the city. And I wanted to get an update on what we've done with that.
Well, there's been a lot of work behind the scenes and, of course, in the community working with the burn grant. Like any large grant that we are so blessed to receive, it takes time to get it up and running and the infrastructure, but it's well on its way. And matter of fact, we have another meeting today where we're going to update about the work that's going on inside the neighborhoods. So we have officers assigned to specific areas. The University of Michigan has come in and done an incredible survey which has given us a lot of in-depth review of not just how do folks feel about their neighborhood, but more importantly, how do they feel they can improve, and really the purpose of the grant. Where does law enforcement, where does the community see law enforcement as having an impact? And the studies have so far been revealing and interesting and positive in many areas. In some areas, we know that we need to make improvement. Areas that we need to make improvement in, we created a funding program. So that's been really interesting, where we have reached out to the Battle Creek Community Foundation, our partner in this grant, and we have asked them to help us to develop a grant-making program. So some of those funds were turned over to the foundation to create grants, learn by doing grants or youth programs, neighborhood-specific programs. And just recently, we went through a panel of community members and reviewed a number of those grants. And what it was remarkable to see the amount of depth and concern these folks and the scrutiny they put into these grants and the hard work that the grant writers and the groups put into them. And I think in the end, we're going to have just a really marvelous product. And it goes right back to the community.
And we've seen very advantageous too when you can assign officers to maybe an area that's struggling, and they get to know and you maybe feel they can depend or at least trust those officers?
Not just trust, but more it's an officer that knows and understands the community. He can react better. You know, it doesn't take 2 or 3 days or a week or several months to get acclimated to that particular neighborhood. They just get to know who the players are, both those that are contributors and those that particularly aren't. And by getting to know the nuances of the community, the officer can react more rapidly, and of course that improves performance and then perception that sure enough we're out there and we're doing something and that we care.
Just a couple of weeks left in 2018. How did we do as a city as far as our crime rates?
You know, the crime data is still being developed, but overall I think we're doing fine. I think we're trending really the national model where, again, violent crime is still starting to uptick just a little, but then again substantially lower than the highest time, which was in 1991. And so that is a little concerning. Petty crime, things like larceny from buildings and retail fraud, those are starting to inch up a little bit, and that's concerning. Not just for our community, but really communities across the country. You know, why is that happening? It's those lighter crimes, those maybe easier achievable type of crimes, where the crimes of opportunity, as those numbers start to inch up, that could be an indicator that maybe perhaps violent crime will start to grow as well.
And of course, we keep hearing about cyber crime and several instances where educators have been doing bad things, and you guys have been able to get the evidence and prosecute them.
The hard part about data is data is only as good as the data that you actually have. And the fact of the matter is cybercrime has been on the rise and had incredible jumps in numbers, not because it's a sudden and real problem. It's been a problem for the last decade. We're just now catching up with reporting it and accurately. We're just now getting to a point where it was the FBI that just changed it to where it was a definable crime and to report on just 2 years ago. That will continue to be a challenge for folks as more and more folks shift to an online type shopping environment.
Chief Jim Blocker, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy New Year, and we'll have you back real soon in January, and we'll talk some more.
YouTube.